Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Madden Benz Unfiltered. Tim Benz and Mark Madden with you. Mark from 105.9 The X. You can hear Monday through Friday on the X, 3 until 6. Read me daily, Breakfast Benz. And you probably are a little surprised to see us on a Tuesday, but with the holiday yesterday coming to you one day late, Mark, lots to talk about. We discussed quite a bit on the podcast that we posted already. One thing we didn't talk about, though, very much, and I know you were interacting with people on social media about it, and that is Patrick Queen talking about how he took less, allegedly, to come to the Steelers. Why?
Yeah, I don't believe that for a second. If Patrick Queen took less to come to Pittsburgh to win, he's a dope. And not least because Pittsburgh ain't going to win. If that was his best option to win now, then he should have taken more money someplace else. I just think he wanted to endear himself to Steeler fans. It reminds me kind of when T.J. Watt ended his holding in 2021, and he said he overruled his agents and took less money. Boy, what a great sacrifice T.J. Watt made, accepting only $80 million guaranteed in that deal. So Patrick Queen, pretty good linebacker, more of a complimentary linebacker in Baltimore. Didn't really take off till they got Roquan Smith there, but it's just stuff that people say during training camp because football's a 24-hour news cycle, and somebody got to say something to prop that up.
Yeah, exactly. It's one of those situations where they want to make it look like, they got the best contract humanly possible, but at the same time want to make themselves look magnanimous about it. And I frankly don't care, especially because the numbers always presented in such a different way. When you say take less, do you mean per year? Do you mean guaranteed? Do you mean the overall length of the deal, which we're always told not to pay attention to and only look at the guarantees? Like, which one is it? Where did you take
Well, he only got the 1 year guaranteed. That's this year. He got a pretty standard contract. So I think that the bloom may have been off his rose despite having performed well alongside Smith, because he performed best alongside Smith and nobody else has Smith except Baltimore.
All that being said, and I do like the signing. I'm glad that he's here. I thought that was a good score in the offseason for Pittsburgh. I don't think that sorry about that. Somehow got lost there. I don't think that the defense overall, Mark, is going to be so shut down that it's going to overcome the existing shortcomings that are still there with the offense.
No, I think it's going to be an average defense with a lot of elite players. And I think that says something about the holes they left in that defense and their refusal to accept it's a passing league. Their weaknesses are wide receiver and cornerback, Tim. That's the two spots they didn't fix in a passing league.
The wide receiver part, to me, it still mystifies me that everybody wants to go so far out of their way to make it sound like it's not a big deal. That there's so many people out there that
it's a big deal.
Yeah, people out there are trying to make it seem like because Arthur Smith relies on one wide receiver, that's somehow an okay thing, a good thing. Well, then that just means that's a flaw in his offense, as far as I'm concerned. And do you want to use an offense that was 7-10 the last 3 years in Atlanta as some sort of baseline by which to make that argument? I don't.
Yeah, I think that they are in a lot of trouble. I think they have the worst group of pass catchers in the league. I think the assumption that Freiermuth can pick up the slack and be a de facto number 2 receiver is ludicrous. And let's even say he is, Tim. Then who's the number 1 tight end? Their offense might borrow from Peter, but never pay Paul either. I think that the job they've done restocking this team in the offseason isn't half as good as people think, because they've left, again, gaping holes at crucial spots the way the league is.
Mark, about the Pirates, you wrote a column for Trib Live talking about the need for them to use some of what they've got in the minor leagues to try to get some players on board now. They're on the fringes of the playoff race. They could probably play their way in with the pitching that they have now to one of the last wild card spots. It's not that hard to make the major league playoffs anymore. Use the 1979 team that just came through town as sort of an example of the way it used to be, with those great teams that used to combat each other in the NL East all the time in the 70s, what it took to make the playoffs then versus what it takes now. You can be mediocre and make it, especially if you have above average, better than mediocre pitching. And I think they have that, at least in the starting rotation right now. They just don't have the bats, and their bullpen's disappointing.
Well, and that 79 team made moves to get better once they saw they were good, like Phil Garner, his acquisition. So, yeah. So, oh yeah, they got Madlock. They already had Garner. My mistake. But yeah, the Pirates could make the playoffs with a couple bats. They're just not going to do it. They are not going to add payroll. They are not going to spend more. They're just going to stick to prospect, recycle for more prospects, and keep fooling the public. And the public here has proven very easy to fool. Attendance went up 33% last year, Tim. It's a bunch of dopes in this town.
The thing about like Skeens and Jones, for instance, they're kind of like a new car when it comes to the Pirates and how they value and how they sell their prospects. They've been driven off the lot now. They're here. The greatest currency the Pirates ever have is someone who's not here yet. So that's why Solomedo and Chandler and I'm trying to think who else did Tamar Johnson, if you want to get away from the pitchers for a little bit. Like, their greatest currency is when they're not here, because the Pirates are great at selling hope. Now these guys are here, and hope in the future are very different pieces of the economy for them.
Yeah, but they're not going to do what's right. They're not going to make moves to try to win now. Their window to win is with Skeens. Skeens alone makes them a contender, along with Jared Jones. But, I mean, Tim, do you think they're going to make the moves I'm talking about? I don't think so. I think they're content just how it is, being on that fringe and teasing and selling.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think they're looking more at 2025 when they feel like they're going to put the pressure on themselves. But that's because
they won't even make the moves we're talking about then.
Probably not. I mean, I think my bet is their opinion is that just by sheer momentum of where these guys are in the development arc, that they'll just be better next year and they're not going to have to spend. But you've got to get yourself a first baseman at some point, for crying out loud. A corner outfielder that can hit it with power.
Well, the continued presence of Rowdy Tellez indicates their attitude, because he sucks, but they're just not going to cut a guy and pay him $3 million to not play. They're just not going to do that. So he'll be here, period, I think.
Yeah, you know what, Mark, to that point, like, for instance, Paul Skeens has pitched twice in Pittsburgh. And in both cases, the talking point coming out of the game was not about Paul Skeens. It was how bad the bullpen was in both cases. And in the case of the most recent game, booing Rowdy Tellez, and the game before that, the people chanting to fire Derek Shelton. Like, these were the talking points coming out of your most sellable attribute, making his first two home starts.
Yeah, I mean, but it doesn't change the general outlook that they're on to something now. They do have the fans fooled right now. They do.
Mm-hmm. No, well, here's one area where I do think they haven't fooled too, Mark. This goes back to the prospect pimping of everything. It's like, we're of the mind already that Solomedo and Bubba Chandler are going to be great pitchers. Well, even if they are good, like, what is the likelihood of those two plus Keller, Skeens, and Jared Jones all being here at the same time? You're not going to get all five up at the same time. That's just crazy.
That's what I've been saying. These prospects they should be trading now will not be here in the Skeens window. And if they do, they'll be arriving just as Skeens leaves. And make no mistake, Tim, Skeens is gone when he hits arbitration, because Nutting will not pay. I mean, what's Skeens going to get in arbitration? Like $25 million? Nutting is not going to pay that. He's just not.
Mark, I don't know if you saw what I put up earlier today, but about the 1979 Pirates, a lot of those guys sort of waxing poetic and very realistic about their team being the last team to win a World Series here. Not the most recent, but the last, and how that's sort of eating at them. Kent Tekulve was really poetic about it and really went into depth about it. John Candelaria was talking about how they've lost 11 guys from that team already, as far as players, not to mention Chuck Tanner and almost the entire coaching staff. And
it bugs Teak more than most. I know that for sure.
Yeah, and Candelaria and Don Robinson both spoke about that quite a bit.
Yeah, but Nutting doesn't care. That's wasted breath on their part,
I guess.
All those guys are, to Bob Nutting, Candelaria and Teak and all them guys, they are not part of the Pirates' rich history. They are a means to an end to do a nostalgia thing to sell more tickets. That's all they are. I bet Bob Notting couldn't even tell you what arm Candelaria threw with.
Is that what the Penguins are doing nonstop in real time?
Yeah, well, as we get reminded every day, when the Rangers playing, Vince Trocheck gets more points and more goals, and possibly the Conn Smythe for MVP if they go all the way.
Yeah, do you think they're going to win that Eastern Conference series and then take care of whoever comes out of the West? Is that your hunch?
I think both series are still up for grabs.
Okay. Are you enjoying watching the playoffs more as they go along?
Blowing the 2-0 lead, that wasn't good for them.
Are you enjoying the playoffs more as they go along, or no?
I don't enjoy anything anymore.
You enjoyed the Pop-Tart movie.
I thought the second round was pretty bad till the very end. I think this round's been pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Rangers at times can be enjoyable to watch, and if the Panthers stood out the way that they play, then they could be worth watching because they're different. But I just think there's a lot of playoff teams that try to play the way the Panthers do once they get in the postseason.
Well, I think it's one thing to try to play that way, Tim. I think it's quite another to have the personnel to play that way. The Panthers are assembled to really bludgeon.
Yeah.
And let's be honest, the Rangers stole game 3. The Panthers were by far the better team in that game. Florida's goaltending, Bob let him down. Shesterkin was outstanding in that game. So I think the Rangers, I don't know, like I said, I still think it's up for grabs. I think they need more out of Panarin and Zibanejad. I just looked this up, Tim. Panarin and Zibanejad, 7 goals between them. That's not very many. That's as many as Trocheck has total. And on the other side of that coin, though, Lafreniere has 6 goals. And boy, there's a guy who was the first pick overall that everybody wanted to give up on relatively quick. Well, it's a good thing the Rangers didn't.
Mark, how about Dan Bilesma get another crack in the National Hockey League? Apparently he's getting the Seattle job. Did you see that?
I'm surprised by that. How about you?
No, I'm not. Not really. I don't know about the mix in Seattle. Like, maybe they're trying.
How long since Buffalo, though? I mean, I thought he was on the pay no mind list.
Yeah, he's been in Coachella now for what, 3 years?
Yeah, for the AHL. They made I think they either they made the finals or won it, something like that, both in the last 2 years.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, good for Dan. I just thought, what I thought really sealed his fate? Remember when he coached the Olympics and a lot of players were critical of him afterwards?
Yeah, but I don't remember what the criticism exactly was.
Basically, that he was just a dope.
Okay, all right. Well, I mean, I think you saw that a little bit in Buffalo when he didn't have the horses to play with like he did in Pittsburgh.
And he feuded with Eichel.
Yeah, well, as we saw, that's not exactly unique to Dan, though, right?
Yeah, can't feud with Eichel. You can't feud with your best guy, though.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think maybe they're trying to do what they did with Terry and here, have a little bit more of a personable guy come along after the previous coach. He filled that role here nicely, but again, it was a different team, and those guys were so young back then, too.
Well, I'm not saying he'll do terrible at Seattle, Tim. I'm just saying I'm surprised he got a shot.
One other thing I want to talk about, Mark, hockey-wise, for folks who haven't heard the podcast yet, it's posted. Go to TribLive.com. You can go to the podcast page and get it at the Fans First Network. You said, Mark, that you went on the air last week and said, hey, look, Mike Sullivan being the Olympic team coach, that probably means he's safe with the Penguins through the Olympics. But once you said that, you got word that it's not necessarily the case, and they might not be using that as a measuring stick at all for Sullivan at FSG.
Not that they're looking to fire him, Tim, but him having the Olympic job will not have any impact on them really not wanting to fire him before those Olympics.
Yeah, and I just wonder if that's in line with a basic timeline of success or failure regardless of the Olympics. Like, they weren't going to fire him at that stage anyway because they are going to give him tons of slack.
Tim, it's really hard for me to get perspective on when they should fire him because I would have already fired him.
No, I get it. I mean, I would have too. It's been 6 years. 6 years without a playoff round victory in hockey is an eternity. It's too long in football, and we're looking at potentially 8 this year with Tomlin. It's way too long in baseball, and it's definitely too long in hockey. It's a lifetime.
Yeah. So, again, as far as the timetable on Dan, hey, they painted themselves into a corner with the 3 guys. Really, the 4 guys with Carlson and the coach. All we can do is watch.
Mark, we spoke a little bit about on the podcast that was worth bringing up here too, since you and I both enjoyed him, Bill Walton passing away, not just as a player where he's great, but also as a broadcaster, a guy, we're not 2 huge NBA guys, but he was fun to watch when he was on NBA games. I know that.
Yeah, I had him on the show once. He was an unforgettable guest. Just everything he appeared to be. Nothing phony about Bill Walton. He was that hippy-dippy, Grateful Dead, philosophizer who I just found incredibly entertaining. One of very few announcers I would turn on the TV or at least, keep on what I was watching if he was involved. Really, him and Howard Cosell, two of the only announcers I can apply that tag to.
It's funny, today they were playing a clip on the TV morning show of Frank Caliendo sitting in with Pash and Walton doing a game, and Caliendo was doing Walton next to Walton, and the clip was like 3 minutes long, and I think during the course of this radio clip, and remember, this is happening on TV, so at least had the power of the visual there, but at the same time, it was like 3 minutes, and I heard 4 3-pointers go in, and not reference anything at all. But Walton could do that all the time and be entertaining. Like, I know Dave Pash. Dave and I went to college together, and he's been his play-by-play partner for a long time, so I'd check in and stay with those games for a while. He would always take you through a game in an entertaining fashion if you really didn't have any skin in it, whether you're betting on it, not betting on it, had a horse in the game or not.
Yeah, that's the key. He was just entertaining. I got to be honest, Tim, I'm surprised Caliendo's still a thing. I thought he would have hit his sell-by date by now. I thought once John Madden retired, that would have been it for Caliendo.
There always seems to be somebody else that he nails at just the right time, impression-wise, that he keeps himself really relevant.
Yeah, I mean, good for him.
I think the guy like, for instance, Shane Gillis now, who got known because of the SNL thing. He does a great Trump. Now he's got a Netflix series. I don't know if it's as good as the Pop-Tart movie that you described on the podcast earlier, but
I don't know that it's not. The Pop-Tart movie, Unfrosted, the Jerry Seinfeld movie, it was good. It was entertaining. Gaffigan was in it. He was tremendous. And Hugh Grant, of all people, was marvelous.
I mean, it's one of those deals where I think I'm going to like it. I just have to mentally make the commitment to the Pop-Tart movie. Like, I need to get over that it's a movie about Pop-Tarts. It almost feels like it's supposed to be like Ford versus Ferrari, but with breakfast food.
That's exactly what it is. It's a parody of that.
All right. Let's get to some comments here. Ron starts things off. Trubo with the chicken wing. Sorry, didn't mean it. Ha, ha, ha. Same thing all over again with this guy. But this is just something that the NHL has wrought upon itself. There's almost no point in debating it anymore, Mark, because the NHL doesn't want to get rid of it. They think that this is part of who they have to be to survive.
And I have said this too many times, but they just want toughness to mean as much as skill. And that's why they let a guy like him get away with what he does constantly.
But I also don't look at a lot of the things that he does, a lot of the hits that we've been complaining about. Those things don't resonate as tough to me. When you cross-check people from behind, when you sucker punch people, when you fly at somebody who's smaller with the elbow, like, that's not tough. That's dirty.
Yeah, but with Colin Campbell, it's tough. You got to be tough to play through it. With George Parros, that's tough. And Gary Bettman, all these years later, still doesn't know the first thing about the actual game of hockey.
Eric says, although he should have been fired years ago, I'm glad to see Angel Hernandez going bye-bye. Why is someone like that able to stick around so long? It's a prime example of how unions can be bad. How long before we see robot umps, Mark? I feel like this is really kind of fast-tracking here the last year and a half. We've started to see that.
Not soon enough. Not soon enough. I would for sure have robot umps the for home plate for sure. But Angel Hernandez, yeah, it's an example of how unions protect incompetence.
Boss says anybody looking to win now needs to take a detour around the teams coached by Tomlin. I guess I thought he was talking about the Pirates at first there, but
he's talking about Patrick Queen. Yeah, I agree. I think Patrick Queen's saying he signed here to win now. I think he's lying. I think it was probably the only deal he could get. I think it was a showbiz move. There's nothing wrong with it, but come on, how can you not see through it?
Well, I don't know if it's the only deal that he could get. It was probably the only team willing to pay him what he wanted because, like, for instance, with the Ravens, they don't need to pay that much because they've got the other guy. They've got the better guy.
Yeah, that's what I mean, Tim. It was the best deal he could get. The idea that he went to the Steelers for less money. Nobody takes less money on their second deal. The second deal in the NFL is where you plot your financial future for better or worse.
Right, exactly. We probably should talk a little bit about the quarterbacks too, Mark, in the sense Justin Fields. Like, do you see this conversation that Broderick Jones kicked back up again last week about him having a Taysom Hill package of being something that could really help them? Or is that in the long run going to hurt them because it's going to throw off the rhythm of the offense, piss off Russell Wilson, and in a way maybe piss off Fields because he thinks he should be playing more?
I think Justin Fields probably got lied to by Tomlin. I think he probably got told there is competition. And like I've been saying constantly, when I hear him talk about a competition that to my mind doesn't exist, he is sowing the seeds of his own discontent.
Speaking of Jones, what do you think about the way they're rolling out the tackles to start?
It's stupid. Dan Moore, I mean, I guess nobody wants to tell him he's not the starter anymore, so he still is the starter. And Jones is rotating between right and left tackle. The stud tackle you brought in last year to be the left tackle is now rotating in practice.
Well, one thing, and I'm planning on writing about this a little bit this week, Dan Moore just doesn't seem to be still wholly embracing or considering how important it is for him to be better at right tackle. And he's going to have to be when he becomes a free agent next year.
It seems to me they're not making him do that.
Yeah, I mean, but he should realize it on his own because their actions are speaking louder than their silence.
Tim, if you made me bet right now, I think Dan Moore Jr. is going to start the first game.
Oh, I think he probably will too, and
which is insane. It's insane. It's like the Pirates with Henry Davis. They just don't have a plan for this guy.
By the way, Ba also added the Buccos never get past first base. No, I was talking about getting somebody to play first base and hit at first base. And he says, but what about the bottom line, says Bob Nutting. Yeah, I mean, it is always about the bottom line. It always will be about the bottom line. We know that. But the bottom line and this season really don't have to be all that much altered. You know, if they make
but like I've often said, Tim, if they would spend more money to try to win and they don't win, then they make less money. The only way to make more money by trying to win is to actually win, and there's never a guarantee of that.
Richard says, when the NHL Department of Player Safety is run by a goon like Peros, is it any wonder why players like Trubo, Wilson, etc. have zero fear of punishment?
No, it is no wonder. That's exactly correct.
Sean says, should Dave Parker be in the Hall of Fame? If so, why is he not?
That's one of those topics that I'm tired of talking about, but he obviously should be in the Hall of Fame. Whether it's the Pittsburgh cocaine trial or whatever, I don't know. But his numbers are clearly better than a lot of people in the Hall of Fame. You can start with Harold Baines. So he definitely should be, but I don't suspect he will be.
Plus, he was more dynamic, more important, more memorable from an era of baseball than a lot of guys that got in after, including.
I agree. I mean, I can't come up, Tim. Here's how lopsided the argument is for him to be in the Hall of Fame. I can't come up with one against.
Yeah, no, you're right. And I'm wondering about the Barry Bonds thing, too, him going into the Pirates Hall of Fame. I think you and I were both on the same page that he should, that the right move was made to put him in. I'm just wondering how it's going to go over with some of those fans who don't want him there. I don't think it's going to be the Yager love fest. And part of that is
I do. I think it will be the Yager love fest.
You think it'll build up to that and then crescendo and come off the same way?
Yes.
You don't think any of that has to do with how they're playing at the time? If there's frustration with how the front office is handling itself or the team is playing?
No, I think that'll be a standalone.
Okay.
As it was with Yager.
You know, I think one thing that Yager had going for him, two things that Yager had going for him. He was great in the postseason, and they won with him here. And the franchise won a bunch of times after he left, which made it easier for him to come back. And I think if
but the thing with Barry, Tim, it's so long ago now since he played here. His numbers in Pittsburgh, I mean, that's Hall of Fame by itself, what he did here with 2 MVPs. And the town needs something to cling to for baseball. And this is it.
By the way, I wanted to get to this one here from Richard. I skipped over it. For the Pirates, selling hope is what is best for business. We discussed that earlier, and I'm serious about what I said before about hope being in the minors. This is no longer about hope now. These guys are here. Whatever they don't do great is something that they've got to fix here now. Like, for instance, Skeens even, Mark. I talked about...
Maybe they don't see it that way, Tim. Maybe they just see Skeens and Jones as an era, and then Chandler and Johnson as an era, and they just keep kicking the can down the road.
Durf says Johnson is already a punch and Judy hitter down in the minors. They think they have the guys that are good enough. They don't, though. They're not close to being good enough. And it's like every time they get an injection from a guy, like, for instance, Nick Gonzalez, they think that's going to be what gets them over the top. Nick Gonzalez is just getting them closer to even hitting-wise. They are so far from getting over the top right now because they need a bunch of Nick Gonzalez's. They're going to do this all year. Nick Gonzalez will probably come back down to average, to the mean in a little bit, but at least he's a first-round pick that's producing somewhat with the bat and better than what they had.
Yeah, but you're right. Every time they call somebody up, they discount the adrenaline factor and think, okay, he's playing good now. He's the answer forever.
Yeah, and we see this in hockey quite a bit, too, when you get call-ups. You get that AHL to the NHL pop. The Penguins thrived off of that with Sullivan in his first 2 years when they won the Cup, which is ironic now because those are the guys it seems to be that he tends to stifle.
Hey, the Pirates have to trade prospects for immediate help. They won't do it. Pure and simple.
Hey,
and they won't sign significant free agents either.
One last thing before we go, Mark. I think you'll echo me on this. Good run for T.J. McConnell. Kind of sorry to see it end in the sweep for the Pacers. But last night, I think he was 15 points, 7 of 16 from the field. They didn't have Halliburton. Had that buzzer beater at the end of the first quarter. The Celtics are just too good for them.
And Tim, how about Indiana had huge leads in 3 games and got swept?
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it was too bad to have it end that way, but I thought McConnell did a lot for himself reputation-wise and able to, there was a run that the 76ers had with him where they won a series or two, I think. He played well in the postseason. People started to recognize how good he was, but I think this solidifies it and was on an even greater stage for a longer time.
Yeah, good for him. I mean, I think, I don't know what his contract situation is like, but I think it guarantees him a few more years in the league, too.
Mark, you got any concerts coming up?
Yeah, Stones again in Cleveland in a few weeks. That's it.
That's it? Yeah.
Yep. For that's it. And Leonard Skinner in AC at the end of the month. That's it for June.
All right, we are going to be back next week. Mark is going to be on today, 3 to 6. He's on each and every day, Monday through Friday, 105.9 The X. Read us throughout the course of the week at Breakfast with Benz. We'll be back with you, Madden Benz Unfiltered, next week on the usual Monday time slot at 9:30 right here on the Trib Live Facebook stream. Listen to the Madden Monday podcast. It's up now at Trib Live.